All right, so now, more than ever, is the perfect time to discuss the lore of the John Morse room. So, the last time Mrs. Borden was seen alive was at 9 a.m. by her stepdaughter, the infamous Lizzie Borden, and the maid, Bridget. And at the time, her family was out of town. So Lizzie's sister, Emma, was out of town. Mr. Borden and Uncle John were both in Fall River. And at the time, Lizzie said she was downstairs ironing handkerchiefs, allegedly. Mrs. Borden was killed in the room where her Uncle John had slept the night before, and it was a really brutal murder. So naturally, it is now the most requested room for overnight stays in the historic Lizzie Borden Axe Murder House and Museum, one of the most requested rooms to stay in overnight. And this is known as the John Morse Room, or the Murder Room, if you're looking for something a little bit more spooky, a little bit more ominous. But the crazy thing is that there was no sign of a struggle. Mrs. Borden had no defense wounds, which is very peculiar. And the evidence is actually unclear whether she was facing her attacker, what position her body was in when this happened. If she could fight back or just didn't, standing up, kneeling, we have no idea. But we do know that one of the blows that was struck above her left ear on the left side of her head. Another blow happened between her shoulder blades that was actually 4 inches deep. So super gruesome. And then the remaining 17 blows were to the back of her head and neck for a total of 19 blows. Pretty gruesome, pretty insane. She was eventually found face down in a pool of her own coagulated blood. And based on the blood and stomach contents of both these victims, we can put her time of death at around 9:30 a.m., a full hour and a half prior to Mr. Borden's murder. And in the photo on the wall in the dining room where the autopsy was actually performed on Mrs. Borden, you can see that she is lying flat on her stomach. You can see that she is in a pool of her own blood around her head. And in the mirror, you can actually see the camera that was used to take the photo. And what's pretty interesting is that the Borden crime scene photos were actually the very first crime scene photos taken in the United States, which is pretty insane. A fun, morbid fact for y'all. Let's keep going.